Not long ago, life in Britain looked shockingly different. Everyday habits that today would spark outrage, lawsuits, or disbelief were once completely normal. Let's count down 16 surprising examples, starting with number 1. Smoking in hospitals. Imagine walking into a hospital where the first thing you notice isn't the smell of disinfectant, but the thick cloud of cigarette smoke. Patients lit up a cigarette while lying in bed, sometimes even with IVS still attached. Visitors smoked by the bedside as if it were a pub, and even doctors and nurses joined in. In fact, staff rooms were filled with ashtrays, and corridors carried a constant haze of smoke. Even maternity wards and children's wards weren't spared. Babies were born into a world where their very first breath might be taken in a smoke-filled room. Today, the idea is horrifying, but for generations it was routine. By the 1980s, campaigns linking smoking to cancer began to shift public opinion. Hospitals slowly banned cigarettes, but for decades, smoke and medicine lived side by side. Number 2. Children without car seats. Family car trips once looked very different. Forget carefully buckling your child into a safety-approved car seat. Most families didn't own one. Children sat freely in the back seat, leaned out of windows, or stood between the front seats pretending to help drive. Some even sat directly on their parents' laps as cars sped down motorways. To parents of the time, it felt normal. Childhood was freer, less restricted, and maybe more exciting. But accidents were far deadlier. By the 1980s, stricter laws and growing awareness of road safety introduced car seats and seatbelts for children. Today, the idea of driving without a child properly restrained feels reckless, even criminal. Yet for millions who grew up before the laws, the memory of bouncing around the back seat on a long drive is nostalgic, a dangerous freedom that belongs to another era. Number 3. Corporal punishment in schools. British schools once relied on fear and pain to enforce discipline. Teachers used the cane, the slipper, or even a ruler across the knuckles. Sometimes the punishment happened privately, but often it was carried out in front of the entire class. Humiliation added to the pain. Even young children in primary schools weren't spared. A forgotten homework, talking back, or misbehaving could earn you a beating. For generations, parents accepted it as normal, even necessary. Spare the rod, spoil the child was more than a saying, it was policy. But by the late 20th century, public opinion shifted dramatically. In 1986, corporal punishment was banned in state schools and later in private schools. Today, the thought of striking a child with a cane feels abusive, but to many adults alive today, it was simply part of growing up. Number 4. Kids buying fireworks. Picture this: bonfire night in the 1960s. Children walked to corner shops with a few coins in their pockets. They bought bangers, rockets, and Roman candles without ID, without parents, and without a second thought from the shopkeeper. Bags of explosives were carried home by kids barely old enough to tie their shoelaces. Unsurprisingly, accidents were common. Fingers were lost, clothes were burned, and back gardens often turned into dangerous playgrounds. Yet at the time, it was just part of the seasonal excitement. Eventually, rising injuries forced stricter laws. Minimum ages were set, and sales were tightly controlled. Today, the image of a 10-year-old casually buying fireworks feels reckless. But for earlier generations, it was simply childhood fun. Number 5. Kids sent to buy alcohol. It wasn't unusual for parents to send their children to the shop with a handwritten note asking for beer, cider, or even spirits. The child handed over the note and some money, and the shopkeeper sold the alcohol without hesitation. No questions asked. It was considered a harmless errand, part of everyday family life. For children, it was often a rite of passage. trusted by parents, trusted by shopkeepers. Today, the idea seems absurd. A child carrying a bottle of whiskey down the street would trigger police involvement, but decades ago, it was as normal as buying bread or milk. Number 6. Driving without seatbelts. Seatbelts weren't always the life-saving standard we know today. In fact, until 1983, drivers and front seat passengers weren't even legally required to wear them. Many cars built in the early post-war years didn't have them at all. When seatbelts became available, plenty of people resisted. Some argued they were uncomfortable. Others claimed they weren't needed at low speeds. Safety campaigns showed the lives they could save, but resistance was strong. Even after the law passed, some saw it as an invasion of personal freedom. Today, driving without a seatbelt feels unthinkable, careless at best, suicidal at worst. But for decades, millions drove unrestrained, convinced it was safe. Number 7. Cigarette adverts on TV. In the mid-20th century, cigarette brands were household names. Glossy adverts appeared during primetime television, featuring glamorous actors, rugged explorers, and sports stars. Slogans became part of popular culture. Smoking was sold as sophisticated, fashionable, even healthy. The tobacco industry poured millions into television advertising. It wasn't until 1965 that cigarette adverts were finally banned from British TV. Later, sponsorship of sports and billboards disappeared as well. Today, the idea of promoting cigarettes on television feels dangerous and irresponsible. But for years, TV was one of tobacco's strongest allies. Number 8. Teenagers drinking wine with meals. Until recently, it was perfectly legal for 16-year-olds to drink beer or wine in restaurants, as long as it came with a meal. Family outings sometimes included a small glass of wine for the teenager. It wasn't seen as rebellious, it was cultural. Many parents believed it taught moderation, but over time, stricter laws ended the practice. Today, the idea of serving alcohol to minors in a restaurant would spark outrage. But for families in the past, it was simply another part of growing up. Number 9. Pints at work. The pub wasn't just for after work, it was part of the working day. In many offices, liquid lunches were common. In industries like shipyards, docks, and building sites, beer was even supplied by employers. Workers thought nothing of having a pint before returning to the job. For decades, it boosted morale and was part of workplace culture. But in the 1980s, tighter drink driving laws and stricter safety rules killed the tradition. Today, drinking on the job is almost unheard of. Number 10. Hitchhiking. Standing at the roadside with a thumb out or a cardboard sign was once an accepted way to travel. Students, workers, even families relied on the kindness of strangers for long-distance travel. It was seen as cheap, adventurous, and normal. During festivals or holidays, roadsides were full of hitchhikers. But as crime stories spread and concerns about safety grew, the culture changed. Today, hitchhiking still exists, but it's far rarer and often considered too risky. Number 11. No national speed limit. Before 1965, large stretches of rural and open roads had no national speed limit. Drivers could travel as fast as they wanted, some treating motorways like personal racetracks. After a series of high-profile accidents, the 70-mile-per-hour limit was introduced. At first, it was controversial. Some felt it restricted freedom, but over time, the limit became a cornerstone of road safety. Today, the idea of unlimited speed on British roads seems reckless, but once it was reality. Number 12. Asbestos everywhere. Asbestos was once considered a miracle material. It was used in insulation, roofing, tiles, and even household products because of its heat resistance. Builders handled it casually, often cutting and installing it without masks or protection. For decades, nobody questioned it. But over time, studies linked asbestos to lung disease and cancer. By the 1980s, bans restricted its use. Today, asbestos is a hazard still present in older buildings, a dangerous reminder of its once ordinary role in British life. Number 13. Public drinking in parks. In past decades, it was common to see groups gathered in public parks with bottles of beer, cider, or wine. Families brought drinks to picnics, and teenagers drank casually on summer evenings. It was part of leisure culture. Eventually, rising concerns about antisocial behavior and public safety led councils to introduce bylaws restricting alcohol in parks. Today, public drinking in many towns can earn you a fine. Number 14. Gendered job adverts. Before the 1970s, job adverts openly specified whether they were for men or women. Newspapers had separate sections. Men were assumed to take professional or manual roles, while women were expected to apply for secretarial or shop positions. The Sex Discrimination Act of 1975 made such adverts illegal, but the memory remains of how openly biased the employment market once was. Number 15. Dogs roaming freely. It was once normal to see dogs wandering neighborhoods alone. Some were strays, others were pets allowed to roam. Children played with them in parks, and shopkeepers left out water bowls. Stricter laws eventually required leashes, registration, and microchipping. The change reduced accidents and disease, but it also ended a more informal era of pet ownership. Number 16. Corporal punishment in the army. Although public flogging ended earlier, laws allowing corporal punishment in the British Armed Forces lingered far longer than many realize. For certain offenses, physical punishment could still be ordered well into the modern era. Changing views on human rights and discipline finally ended it, but the fact that it lasted so long shows how slowly some traditions fade. These stories remind us how quickly society changes. What once felt normal can look shocking within just a generation. Which of these surprised you the most? Let us know in the comments, and subscribe for more forgotten UK history.